Chapter 17. Lift up, she whispered. Evan tilted his hips as Flora yanked his jeans and boxer briefs down to his knees. He relaxed back into the seat as she stroked up the length of his thighs with a firm touch. The cold, soft leather on his butt and the feel of the hairs on his legs stroked against the growth was maddening. Flora giggled as his penis jerked in response. He scowled and waggled his brows reprovingly. Supremely satisfied that she finally had the upper hand, Flora caressed his legs again and again, making Evan almost bite his lip to prevent himself from begging. She peeked up at him from under her fringe, biting her lip to keep from grinning as her left hand wrapped around his shaft. Leaning in, Flora extended the tip of her pink tongue, stopping for a moment as she did. Evan held his breath as he watched her drop lower, anticipation causing a slight sweat to break out on his forehead. At the last second, before her mouth would have made contact with his dick, she changed direction and he almost whimpered. But any sound of disappointment he might have made changed instantly into a harsh cry of exultation as Flora wrapped her lips around his balls instead. Evan groaned as pure wet heat enveloped him. She smiled against his thigh with wickedness in her expression, massaging his length with one hand and suckling gently on one heavy orb, then the other. Once she was satisfied she held his attention, her tongue began to trace figure eights as she cradled him in her palm. Evan's hips writhed, and the raw need in his face made Flora's heart patter. She considered herself pretty good at this, and the fact it was Evan, and he was gorgeous, meant for once there was a real pleasure in the giving. She inhaled deeply. He smelled terrific, better than ever, but also disturbingly like Bobby. It would be nice if one day she discovered his own scent, but for now Evan's skin radiated drifts of sandalwood and cinnamon and just a touch of vanilla sweetness. Flora sighed. Was she committing to having this man permanently? It would be thoroughly annoying to have such a lot to live up to. Even his pubic hair was perfect, and Flora doubted he indulged in any kind of grooming. No, Evan was blessed, and the universe, in its wisdom, was inflicting responsibility for that much manliness on her. Flora, can you stop dreaming? You're killing me over here. Evan's large hand scooped her face, his cold fingers startling Flora from her quandary. He pulled her higher while he grabbed his cock and wafted it at her with a raised eyebrow. The look he gave her practically scorched Flora's cheeks. Nobody had ever looked at her with such blatant desire. Can we move along and get to sucking it? Her forehead wrinkled. Excuse me, you cheeky bugger. Evan tried to keep his expression commanding, which lasted all of 5 seconds. Suck me, please, sweetheart. Better. I like that much better. Flora kissed the plump head of his shaft, lips parted and a soft flutter of her tongue. Evan nearly shot off the seat in response. Sucking firmly down his length and back up to the crown, she took him in both of her small, strong hands and stroked gently in opposite directions, lavishly licking his glands over and over like she couldn't get enough. Fucking hell! Evan pumped his hips, unable to sit back and take what she was doing. She glanced up, eyes shiny and euphoric. Sensing her torment was just a little too much, she rose up on her knees and hunched her back, nearly pushing her forehead into his lower abdomen. Evan's hands flew to Flora's hair as she took him down in one smooth motion. Her position sent him straight down her throat. So far he could feel the muscles contracting around him. Evan groaned aloud as she travelled leisurely back up. The irrepressible minx was giving him the smuggest look as her lips and tongue played gently with the ridge of his penis. He stroked Flora's neck, holding her quite tenderly in his grip. She was annihilating his staying power with every soft sound she uttered. Her obvious joy in both pleasing and devastating him was turning Evan into a boneless, blubbering sap. There may have been a slight temptation to cry, he was so happy. Tell me what you want, Evan. I want you, Flora. Cheeky as hell, and in my bed. I want you sucking my cock like this every day for the rest of my days. Flora casually tapped his dick on her cheek. Well, I think that's probably a bit greedy, and it won't be half as much fun when I have false teeth. Evan grunted in response. Somehow I think I could overlook it. Now seriously, I'll die if you don't finish me off. Flora contemplated cruelty for one more moment, then slid her lips back down on him, so far that Evan could feel her nose brush his groin. She put her hands on his hips, then slid them underneath his butt and pulled him into her. Evan finally couldn't take any more and lost what little gentleman he had left in him. He thrust into Flora's hot, greedy mouth and did an honest-to-God growl. He was pretty sure that meant he'd checked another rotten cliché off his list, and that was the last cogent thought he had, as Flora bobbed her head in front of him, sucking harder in time with his movements. The car echoed with soft grunts and breathy murmurs. If Lady J looked out of her window right now, Flora knew she would have no question why her car was rocking on its wheels. Evan's fingers tightened on her scalp, his cock thickened, nearly choking her, and with a heartfelt "fuck," he filled her throat with thick, salty, masculine essence. Evan couldn't help noticing both of them shuddered with aftershocks. Flora released him, lovingly stroking his shaft as he twitched and gasped. It took several long moments before he came to a slow, sated halt. "Did you come, Flora? Just from sucking me?" She laughed delightedly. "You are gorgeous, but not that gorgeous." I sorted myself out on the back of my heel at the same time. The faint moonlight shining in the car illuminated Flora's deliciously blushing cheeks. When their eyes met, she shot him a wink. Evan bent and kissed her mouth. "You rule, Flora. You absolutely fucking rule." There was a sudden sharp slam behind them coming from the direction of Brigley Hall, and Evan shot off the back seat in alarm. He landed awkwardly on Flora and tried to yank his trousers back up as they heard the crunch of footsteps across the moonlit gravel. "Quick, help me with my pants. I can't get the bobby back in." Flora tried to help with Evan's predicament as she straightened his underwear and fastened his jeans with shaky fingers. In other circumstances, the panic in his voice would have been funny, but she was currently too scared of them both getting caught. "Shit," she whispered. "Lady J must be off her rocker if she's going after him tonight." Within seconds she'd be upon them, and Flora wiggled onto her side, with Evan hurriedly spooning in behind. He yanked the fluffy travel rug back over them, just as the driver's side door opened. There was a thud on the passenger seat as a handbag sailed across. Something else followed the same trajectory, and it chinked like heavy glass as it clashed against the buckle on her bag. Flora guessed that not only was Jemima still drunk from earlier, she intended to elevate her saturation levels with the two of them in the car. The Audi roared to life and Jemima fiddled with the sound system before the unmistakable sound of AC/DC's "She's Got Balls" blasted through the speakers. Flora had her nose bunched against the passenger seat of Lady J's car, but there was still room to flinch when she heard the bottle unscrewed, followed by an audible swig, the Audi swerving as Jay attempted to steer one-handed. She tossed the bottle back onto the seat, and Flora felt Evan's long, brawny arm reach out from under the blanket and across her. She stiffened, afraid he was going to get them caught, but he managed to snag the bottle quickly before covering them back over. "What did you do that for?" Flora whispered. "What, Flora? Do you want her to continue getting pissed?" Evan's reply was equally surreptitious. Minutes later, the flaw in his actions was revealed when Jemima put her hand across for the vodka. She clawed the seat frantically with her acrylic fingernails, and not finding the bottle, she took her eyes completely off the road and commenced to search the floor of the passenger seat. The car jerked out of the narrow lane, and there were several body-numbing jerks as the tyres rode the edge of the drainage ditch. A few breathless seconds passed before it regained traction on the tarmac. Flora struggled to stifle a moan as Evan's elbow jerked into a sensitive spot between her hip and groin. Jemima let out a yell of frustration at the loss of her alcohol and put her foot down harder on the accelerator. I'm sorry, sweetheart. Are you okay? Evan's large palm rubbed gently on Flora's belly. He felt the back of her head nod against his chest before she whispered, We shouldn't talk. Another distraction, and she might kill us all. He kissed the side of Flora's face below her temple. Okay. He gathered her close and wrapped both arms tightly around her. It wouldn't be much help against head injury, but it made Flora feel safer, even as she gritted her teeth and said a little prayer. Long minutes passed as Jemima's speed barely altered through a series of hairpin turns. Flora clutched her mobile phone in her sweaty fist, wondering if she should send a quick text to Bobby. Maybe she was a coward, but she didn't see how a high-speed pursuit would help their situation. There was an audible change in the road noise as the car crossed over a series of cat's eyes. They were heading on to the motorway, and a loud horn greeted them as they emerged from the slip road onto the main carriageway. Jemima flipped them off, not even bothering to check the mirrors. Several times the car rode the hard shoulder, and Evan bit down on his tongue as the juddering from the rumble strip made his teeth chatter. The Audi probably had superior suspension, but laid out on the floor, it was offering them very little protection. He heard Flora give a suppressed sob and tilted his head. Her eyes were screwed tightly shut, but a tear had leaked out of one of the corners. At that moment, Evan would have happily leant across and wrung Jemima's scrawny neck. As the car righted itself and stabilised, he risked discovery and flipped Flora around, tucking her head into his neck. We're going to be okay. She nodded, keeping her nose buried in his chest. Jemima turned the music up louder, and Evan swore his ears were about to bleed. He swiped the phone out of Flora's hand. Fuck this, he growled. The text he fired to Bobby read, SOS on A1, LGEM, DUI, need help now. The ping sounded during a lull between songs, and Evan shot back under the blanket as Jemima looked over her shoulder. She gave a cry of triumph as she spotted the neck of the vodka bottle, scooping it up and forgetting all about other distractions. Evan squeezed Flora's waist and tried to reassure her, but he couldn't give her something he didn't feel himself. He just had to hope Bobby would catch up with them, and the longer they stayed on the A1, the better, because it would give his new friend a straight run to close the distance. The thought had no sooner left his brain than Jay veered from the fast lane straight across the carriageway and off at the next exit. He reacted fast to try and keep his weight on his elbows, but the sharp motion slung him into Flora, and she began to suffocate against his sweater. Trying not to choke on the tickle of wool and dog hair, she managed to push an arm up between them, gaining an inch of space, but it disappeared as the vehicle hit a roundabout at a stomach-lurching speed and swung left, Jemima putting her foot down harder as they finally met a stretch of straight open road. About a mile later, she made a sharp right and screeched to a halt amid a flurry of cheap, noisy gravel. Jay flung the car door open and got out, slamming it behind her. There was a combined whoosh of breath as both Flora and Evan exhaled, Flora feeling like she'd vomit if she didn't get some air. Evan slung the rug off and poked his head up so he could see out of the window. He pressed the phone into Flora's hand. We're at a pub, the Turtle Inn. The place is boarded up and there's nothing but fields behind it. Call Bobby and tell him the name and that it's left off the A1, about 20 minutes from Brigley Hall. He should be able to find us from that. I don't like this. I don't want you to go on your own. It might not just be Smith living there, and who knows what Lady J is capable of. Flora, I can handle myself. I know you can, but what if somebody takes you by surprise? Evan, listen to me, because I've never cared this much about anybody except my sister. She raised her eyes to the car ceiling as if asking for assistance. I don't know how to be scared for you on this kind of level. If something bad happens, I won't get over it. She looked up at him with wide, tear-filled eyes. Her pupils looked huge, dilated from fear or adrenaline, he didn't know which. Evan leaned into her, slipping a leg between Flora's and giving just enough of his body weight to ground her. "Am I your boyfriend?" Her eyes flickered. Evidently, despite everything, she still wasn't too sure. "I'd like to think so." "Well, I am. And do you love me?" Tears began to roll unchecked down Flora's round cheeks. "Disgustingly and dreadfully. And I won't let anything happen to you because of me." "If you love me, everything else will be fine. All I have to do is make sure Smith doesn't leave before Bobby arrives. He may not even have to know I'm there." Evan inched backwards and opened the door. He had one foot outside when Flora grabbed his other leg, nearly pitching him on his backside. "Flora, frigging hell, let go." "I've changed my mind. Let's move to London and leave all these nut jobs to do whatever." "And what happens to the dogs, sweetheart? All the ones Smith will use for bait?" Evan smiled shamelessly, all big white teeth and shiny eyes. "Flora, this is the part where I save the day. Get this done, and you can swoon in my arms." Flora wiped her hands uselessly across her eyes, getting dog hair and carpet bunnies inside them. "I don't know what sexist books you've been reading, but I'll kill you if it all goes wrong and I end up at your funeral." Evan shoved his face back inside the car, still hopping on one leg. "Okay, look. At worst I'll get maimed, but I refuse to get dead. Now make the call to Bobby." He pressed a kiss of finality to her lips and wrenched out of Flora's grip. Flora begrudgingly followed instructions. Her teeth gritted as she watched Evan run across the car park and around the side of the building, keeping low in an attempt to stay out of sight. When a sleepy Bobby picked up, she couldn't help the surprised squeal she made in his ear. "Oh my God, were you asleep? You're supposed to be on your way here." "Huh?" In the background, Flora heard Fiona ask what was going on. "Oh, bugger! Bugger, Bobby! We texted you. Evan and I are at the Turtle Inn. God, we're about 20 minutes away. We think Smith is here, and Evan's gone in after him. He thinks you're already on your way. Please, 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 you've got to move your ass right now and come help us." Flora heard rustles, followed by a bed squeaking, and a shrill poodle squawk as Bobby stepped on one of Jemima's dogs. "Fuck! Fuck it all to hell! Fiona, help me! Grab my car keys, wherever they are. Bobby, do you know where it is? Evan says it's left." "I know it, Flora. I'm on my way." "I'm coming too." "No, Fiona, you're staying here. A crazy drugged-up poodle is over there doing a crap in my best trainers. You need to make sure I've still got a house to come back to." Flora heard him running down the stairs and Fiona's protest behind him. Bobby cut her off midstream. "Fiona, absolutely not. I'll be dealing with a madman, a mad woman, and at least one fucking vicious dog, and that's just what we know about." "What did you say?" Flora's voice cut to a whisper as the blood iced in her veins. Her eyes flicked desperately to where she'd last seen Evan. "I'm saying I'm not letting anybody else endanger themselves. I'm at the car, Flora. I'm coming." Flora dropped the phone as Bobby called her name. She muttered to herself over and over, "We forgot about the dog. We forgot about the dog. We forgot about the dog. Shit, fuck, bugger balls, bastard." Panicking, Flora leapt out of the car and searched front and back for potential weapons. She grabbed the vodka bottle and the travel rug and rummaged under the passenger seat, hoping for a gun, a kosh, maybe a machete, all things she could imagine Jemima owning. Her hand found something thick, rubber and about 12 inches long, pulling it out so she could see it in the moonlight. "Well, that's exactly what I need," she muttered sarcastically. "An enormous fucking dildo. I can't believe the universe expects me to save the day with a lime green bobby." Flora brandished it about, trying a few wild practice swings, though it has got a nice bit of weight to it. "Ooh, lurgy alert." She hastily sterilised it with the last inch of vodka and shoved it in the waistband of her jeans. Armed with her fluorescent weapon, Flora took off in the same direction as the over-optimistic Scotsman. Evan jogged to the far side of the pub and found the entrance to the old games room. The door was locked, but it looked like it might yield with a bit of pressure, so he put his hand out and pressed, trying to see if it would go quietly. He was about halfway to succeeding when the sound of unhappy voices came from not far inside the room. Evan backed away and ran to the rear. Someone had pried a couple of the protective boards from the windows, and he used his sweater sleeve to clear a patch in the dirty glass so he could see what was happening. Lady Jemima stood in the centre of the open-plan bar, her nose less than an inch from Gabriel Smith's. In her heels she towered above him, and her hair stood on end like Lion-O from the Thundercats. As Evan watched, he could see spit flying out of her mouth as she berated her former husband. "Where are my dogs, Gabriel? Where the fuck are you keeping them?" Inside, from another room on the opposite side of the bar, the enraged snarl of an unamused canine could be heard. "Oh, hell," Evan whispered, hanging his head for a second. "We forgot about the fucking dog." Smith shoved Jemima away with both hands to her chest, causing her to stumble, and despite his personal dislike, Evan couldn't help but flinch. "I don't know what the hell you're talking about, Jem. The only dog here is Spike, but if you want to send some poodles over to play, I'm sure he'd love to meet them." "Gabriel, somebody broke into my house tonight and stole my dogs, and the only person who would gain from that is you. Now tell me where they are before I burn this fucking place down." Jemima rummaged in her bag and came out with a cigarette lighter. She stalked over to the worn drapes in the front window and ignited the flame, holding it close, but not touching the fabric. "Go ahead, babe. It's not like I own the place. I'm squatting." Thwarted, she screeched, "Fine. You won't take notice of me? Maybe I'll just call the police. God knows you're in a shitload of trouble. Assault, breaking and entering, theft. I can't even remember the rest." She reached back into her voluminous bag and pulled out a phone. In 2 strides, Smith was upon her. With a vicious swipe, he knocked it from her hand and she cried out. A veteran at handling his tactics, Jemima's recovery was quick, and she swung her bag in a 2-handed grip, dealing him a sound blow to the side of his head. The momentum threw her into him and the pair began to grapple. They were well matched and ruthless, trading blow for blow, tearing at each other's hair and skin. Jay got in a good kick to Smith's balls and he backhanded her across the face in retaliation. Evan looked on in horror. He had zero tolerance for Jemima, but unfortunately she was still a woman, and he didn't watch men lay into women. His pulse throbbing in his temple, he looked around and spotted an old metal beer barrel. It was heavy enough for the job, and he cursed as his fingers nearly froze to the surface. Shifting his centre of gravity, he hurled it through the window, shattering glass out in all directions. The noise didn't even vaguely disrupt Gabriel and Jemima. Elbowing out some glass and using his sleeve to protect the heel of his hand, Evan vaulted into the pub. Through a red mist of anger, he raced across the room, grabbing Smith's chest with one hand, his other fingers fisted. He cocked his arm back and clocked Smith with a punch that used every inch of his body, from his toenails to the ends of his hair. Gabriel flew backwards with a satisfying smack, hitting the floor tailbone first. There was just the slightest bit of breath left in him to make a pained groan, and Jemima, ever the opportunist, seized the excuse to show Evan her gratitude, grabbing him by the neck and plastering her body to his. Unfortunately, suffering the affliction of being a gentleman, he allowed her a second's grace before attempting evasive manoeuvres, and Jemima held fast like an unfettered lobster dodging a boiling pan. He still had his hands on her forearms, trying to break her grip, when Smith punched him from behind, landing a nasty blow in his kidneys. Evan's back arched and Jemima finally let go. Enraged, he swung around and buried his elbow into Smith's solar plexus. As Gabriel lost the ability to breathe and crumpled, Evan followed up with a left to the bridge of his nose and he went down again. "Who needs martial arts, you grey-eyed bozo? Keep greasing the carpet with your lardy arse if you know what's good for you. He'd barely finished speaking when Jemima threw herself on top of Smith and started hitting him with her fists. Where are my dogs, arsehole? Answer me, you fucker. You won't ruin what I have. They're mine. It's my life, my money. You're just a fucking big mistake that needs to die, die, die. Evan yanked up a struggling Jemima and grabbed her bag, pushing her towards the front door. She continued her tirade as he slung her and her possessions through the gap and slammed the door behind her. He thoroughly expected her to stagger around the back and reappear like a crazed harridan, but at least he'd gained a minute's peace. Breathing out, he turned back towards where he'd left Smith. He'd gone. Evan groaned in disbelief and looked up. There he was, standing with his hand on the door to the lounge bar. Gabriel's upper lip curled in satisfaction. Who needs martial arts when you've got one of these? The door swung open and 40 kilos of highly motivated, utterly overwrought dogs shot through the gap and charged towards Evan. Kill Spike! Kill it! Kill it! Kill it! Smith yelled in savage anticipation, waiting for all his training to pay off. Evan froze as the dog stopped no more than a couple of meters from him. It lowered its broad skull, calculating his weak spots, and Evan found no shame in shielding his balls. He'd rather die intact than a eunuch. With no clue how to prevent certain injury, and no weapon or way to get hold of the thing, he could only watch as Spike snarled, his gnashing teeth more impressive than a theme park velociraptor. Menacing trails of saliva dripped onto the floor as the creature flexed on its haunches, ready to pounce. Spike! Fucking kill now! Evan murmured a heartfelt oath, abandoned his balls and hauled one leg back, thinking the humane thing to do was boot it between the legs and pray to God he winded it. Even hyped up to the max and rightfully afraid of those teeth, he did not want to murder an animal. Spike made his move and a horrified "No!" cut through the air. A glass bottle broke behind Evan, stealing a valuable hesitation from the dog, and like a blur in the corner of his right eye, Flora ran in front of him. Black wings seemed to spread from her frame, and as Spike's limbs left the floor, she caught and swaddled him in Jemima's travel rug, neatly immobilizing his body. Evan watched in horror as she dropped her weight on the dog, pinning it to the floor. Her chest heaved as she struggled to keep Spike's jaws contained. It looked like a 60-40 wrestling match in the dog's favour. Flora, what the fuck? Stay back, Evan. I barely got him. He could only watch as Smith took the opportunity to run for the front door and freedom. Son of a bitch, Evan yelled as Smith fled. But there was no way he could leave Flora with the dog. He cursed again, something Scottish that went over Flora's head. Evan, she gasped, grab the rubber dick out of my waistband. He looked at her, thinking stress must have affected her marbles. You've got a rubber dick in your pants. How did I not notice before? This is not the time to be cute. I'd like to get out of this with all of my fingers. She straddled the dog's torso with one of her thighs, getting a better grip on the rug and pulling the dog's legs in tighter. Evan crouched down, trying to avoid the snapping teeth, and spotted the green cock jutting out of Flora's jeans. The placement was where it should have been on an erect person of the male persuasion. This image is going to mess with my head long after I've married you. Angry snarling from her captive accompanied the sound of Flora's stunned falsetto. You're going to marry me? Isn't that what I've been saying? No, not really, Flora squeaked. But for now, I'd rather you grab the cock out of my pants and shove it in this boy's mouth. Evan yanked on the dildo, gave it a cursory once-over and jammed it lengthwise across the dog's jaws. Spike bit down with relish, appreciating the satisfyingly chewy texture. He shook his head almost playfully, but Evan wasn't convinced. I guess it's lucky Lady Jemima invests in quality sex toys. Anything cheaper would have been annihilated in seconds. Help me, Evan. Grab his backside while I get off the floor. We're putting him back where he came from? Uh-huh. Let's do it. Evan grabbed the rug ends and took the dog's weight while Flora hauled herself up. With the killer mutt happily grinding plastic between his molars, they jogged him across the pub between them. As gently as possible, they tossed him in a low slide across the tiled floor of the bar annex. Before Spike could detangle himself, Evan grabbed Flora, spun her through the door, and slammed it shut behind them. He hauled her into his arms and held on tight, tucking his nose into Flora's neck and breathing her in, her bravery and quick-wittedness continuing to baffle him. Finally, able to pull back, Evan brushed her hair from her face and pinned her with a fierce blue stare. "Are you okay? You're not hurt?" He pushed her sleeves up and checked her hands, turning them over as if he couldn't believe she was unscathed. "I'm okay, Evan. I'm okay. Dealing with dogs is what I do, even if it's not usually on that scale." Despite her words, the tears were falling freely, and Evan held her head close to his chest. His hand on the back of her neck was possessive and comforting. This man was going to marry her. She was going to have a happy ever after, just like Freya. Shit, we still have to stop Smith. Evan reluctantly let Flora go and hurried to the door. What he saw next made his face screw up in disgust. I don't fucking believe these two. He watched in amazement as Jemima attempted to drive her car off the property. She was already gaining speed while Gabriel ran desperately alongside. Flora made a start to come with him and Evan yelled, "Don't you dare think about it." He streaked across the gravel, sheer desire to end this idiocy, giving power to his legs. Smith had managed to get Jemima's door open and was trying to yank her out of the seat. He'd nearly succeeded when Evan launched himself at Gabriel's body, grabbing him by the hips. Smith let go, and the pair of them rolled end over end. When they came to a stop, Evan had the advantage of landing on top. He quickly rolled the stouter man onto his front and pinned his arms behind his back. While he focused on keeping him contained, Jemima changed course. Instead of exiting the grounds, she spun the wheel and performed a tight arc around the perimeter of the car park. Evan didn't look up. He'd lost all interest in Jemima's Looney Tunes antics. Smith was all he cared about, and he was hanging on to him until Bobby arrived. He heard Flora's panicked cry just as the engine noise accelerating towards him intensified. Evan looked up, and all he could see was Audi's 4 interlocking circles and Jemima's personalised number plate 6 feet from his face. He wasn't sure how he moved. He felt sure his brain stayed in the same place, but somehow his body reacted. With no time to move Smith and no way to save them both, Evan leapt upwards, just as Jemima's bonnet clipped him. He was tossed up and over the windshield and bounced off the left-hand side of the roof. He hit the ground with a heart-stopping thud that sent Flora running towards him screaming. Jemima barely noticed the collision. She was too intent on ploughing her wheels straight over the prone figure of Gabriel Smith, not satisfied until both sets of tyres had completed revolutions over his head. Flora sat on the gravel with Evan's bloodied face in her lap. She could only watch in horror as Smith's body jerked and twitched while Jemima kept right on going. Accelerating once more, she sped towards the entrance just as a police car arrived with full lights and siren blazing. Bobby yanked on his steering wheel, managing to avoid hitting Jay head-on as the front end of her car smashed into his passenger side. Jemima's bonnet crumpled and the motor finally petered out. The wail of Bobby's siren squawked pitifully off-key as the entire debacle came to a bone-crunching, engine-smoking halt.